Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're going to try and cut through some of the usual geopolitical noise.
Right.
We want to reveal these, well, hidden cultural currents that the source material suggests really underpin America's, unwavering support for Israel.
It's a fascinating angle.
Yeah, our deep dive into the core source, the bomb.pdf,
Mm-hmm.
especially those sections on the bomb, the myth, and the Mossad Fairy Godmother.
Mm-hmm.
It seems to unveil how this really ingrained narrative deep in the American imagination shapes this whole relationship. There are some genuinely surprising facts and connections in there.
Absolutely.
Ready to maybe unpack the myth behind the policy.
Let's do it. It's interesting how this research frames that connection. It argues basically that America isn't just, defending an ally. It's almost like it's reenacting a story.
A story.
Yeah, one that's been decades in the making. A narrative playing out primarily in the American imagination. Israel, in this specific view, isn't just a partner state. It actually takes on the role of a character almost, a mirror, even a spiritual twin, as the text puts it.
A spiritual twin? Why?
Yeah, it's seen as this kind of condensed, morally unambiguous version of what America still believes it was, or maybe what it feels it ought to be.
That perception, that spiritual twin idea, that feels really powerful. And the source, it really leans into the contrasts, right? It highlights this perceived duality
Duality is a good word for it.
where America might, hesitate.
Israel acts, that's the narrative.
And where America apologizes.
Israel retaliates. The text we're looking at, it casts Israel as maybe the last Western nation that still operates by what it calls the rules of the old game. Meaning, real sovereignty, decisive violence, and absolutely no shame in the simple drive for survival. It sounds like America sees a kind of projected ideal there.
Yeah, it does.
Precisely. And this perspective suggests the connection goes way beyond just traditional policy or diplomacy. It digs into culture, into the actual stories America tells about itself. Those childhood impressions of grit and competence we all kind of absorb from TV and airport thrillers.
What?
It's almost like every American spy show, every thriller has to have a Mossad agent or at least an off-book Israeli contact who just doesn't blink.
It's true. You do see that.
So in this narrative, Israel basically plays the role America wrote for itself. The principled killer, the one who remembers why wars are fought, and maybe understands that peace is, well, temporary unless someone with steel in their hands is girding it.
So this idea then of the Israeli operator as a kind of mythical fixer, the source says, competent beyond reproach. That seems incredibly pervasive. Can you expand on that portrayal a bit?
Absolutely. The research describes them as this mythical fixer, not like magical, but just supremely capable, really effective.
Okay.
It even draws this compelling parallel to Vonnegut's Blue Fairy Godmother from Mother Night. Remember that?
Vaguely, yeah.
Where the Mossad agent acts as America's sort of narrative conscience. The ghost in the machine who actually gets things done, the fixer with a pistol and zero time for internal memos.
Uh-huh.
They're often portrayed as the adult in the room, the one still believing in the core mission when everyone else is, distracted by optics or bureaucracy.
And it's almost shockingly literal sometimes, like in that movie, The Soldier from '82.
Oh, yeah, that's a prime example the source uses.
The source highlights this, where Ken Wall's CIA character, he's completely betrayed by his own side.
Right, totally hung out to dry.
And he finishes his mission, not with American help, but through the loyalty and, frankly, the skill of a female Mossad operator.
Mm-hmm.
And then there's that iconic scene, well, iconic if you've seen it, where they drive a Porsche over the Berlin Wall.
Which is just, yeah.
It's more than just Cold War action, isn't it?
Uh-huh.
Like the research points out, it feels like an allegory.
Yeah.
Israel still believes in the mission, even when America seems to falter.
That image, that unwavering resolve, it just echoes through so many pop culture examples. There's a whole section in our research on pop culture Mossadism.
Right.
You think about Eyal Levine in Covert Affairs. He's always the unshakable ally, the ultimate backup,
And I remember him.
Or the series Fauda, which consistently shows Israeli operators as, maybe morally gray, but always tactically elite.
Mm-hmm.
And then you've got countless Israel-adjacent figures in shows like Homeland, Reacher, The Terminalist, characters who consistently do the kind of decisive, often pretty brutal work that, according to this narrative, Americans can't admit they still want done.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it? I mean, how these fictional portrayals, whether you're consciously thinking about it or not, might be subtly shaping your perception, your own perception of competence and decisive action on the world stage.
It feels like a powerful undercurrent.
Yeah, almost conscious.
And that brings us to another really potent idea the material explores: Israel as the nation that never went soft.
Okay, never went soft. What does that entail?
Well, it's this fantasy, really, of a country that supposedly never fell to internal bureaucratic requirements like DEI briefings or strategic patience. A nation that, in this view, raises its daughters to fight and its sons to shoot and doesn't cry about the costs. This vision, it seems to resonate aesthetically, not just religiously, but on a gut level within the American psyche.
And the iconography of this is, well, it's striking. Our research brings up Dr. Ruth.
Dr. Ruth, yeah.
The sex therapist.
Who was, in fact, a Haganah sniper.
Yeah,
That's not just a bit of trivia, is it?
No, and not according to the source. It's held up as symbolic. Symbolic of Israel's supposed culture of duality. Love and war, softness and steel, therapy and fire discipline.
What a potent image that is.
It certainly is. And the text we're diving into, in a section it actually calls the competence fantasy. It speaks right to this.
Okay.
It says, in America's eyes, the ideal Jewish hero isn't the neurotic Brooklyn writer stereotype.
Right. It's the operator. While there's maybe a certain reverence for Jewish genius in finance or media, the deeper admiration, the sort of romanticization, is often for the Israeli who carries a rifle, speaks 4 languages, and crucially pulls the trigger without asking permission. And this also connects to some historical context explored in the research. Appendices mention the Western psyche maybe casting Islam as its shadow civilization.
Okay.
And in that narrative frame, Israel plays the gatekeeper, the front line, the last bastion, maybe, against what's perceived as this ambitious, spiritual, rising opposite number.
So, okay, when we connect these deep cultural narratives to things happening now, or things mentioned in the source, like, say, B-2 bomber strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities.
Right. That example is in there.
What does it all mean? What's the underlying message being conveyed according to this analysis?
Well, it raises a really critical question, doesn't it? Why might some people perceive using such a, feared aircraft like the B-2 as mere cosplay or something cartoonish?
Yeah.
The research argues its deployment actually serves to remind the world that America still remembers how to show its teeth, even if it forgets why.
Show its teeth.
It's described as a manifestation of what one section calls a ghost of empire, where the B-2 doesn't tweet, it doesn't attend summits. It just silently reminds everyone of America's capacity for overwhelming force. It's a very different kind of communication.
There's also this common thread, the research points out, in how certain leaders, figures like Netanyahu, Trump, even Putin, are often viewed not really as traditional statesmen.
No, more like caricatures almost, or throwbacks.
Exactly.
Yeah, like men who didn't get the memo that postmodernity won. That's a direct quote. Yet they endure, don't they?
They do.
Because the source suggests what the liberal order might call barbarism, they just call Tuesday.
Wow.
And this really speaks to a deep-seated underlying belief in the logic of force.
The logic of force.
Yeah. The perspective offered in the material is that while many nations, perhaps, aspire to raise doves, only a few still consciously raise hawks. And not out of bloodlust, the argument goes, but out of memory, out of realism, out of a kind of grim, unspoken love for their people.
And for Israel, and maybe for that part of America that still holds on to this mindset, the belief seems to have always been essentially peace through superior firepower.
That's the core idea presented.
Not because it's nice, but because it's seen as just brutally necessary.
Right.
Our research does highlight historical points that kind of underscore this narrative. It points out, for instance, how the Holy Land's borders were, drawn by aristocrats in London. And America gave diplomatic recognition, sure, but Israel did the rest with blood and steel. That's a powerful phrase from the text.
It is.
And it makes a crucial distinction, too. While countries like France helped birth America, and Russia was vital in crushing Nazi Germany.
Both hugely important allies, historically.
The research suggests only Israel still uniquely fits this specific narrative role for America today. Righteous, armed, and unrepentant.
That specific combination seems key to this interpretation.
So if we just take a step back for a second, the core insight here really seems to be that America's relationship with Israel isn't just political or strategic. It's not just that.
No, it seems deeply woven into a cultural narrative.
Story of an ideal self, maybe, projected onto another nation.
That captures it well. And if we connect this to the bigger picture, Maybe a final thought for you listening. Consider how deeply these cultural narratives, these stories we've been discussing, might shape not just our international relations, but also our very national identity.
Yeah.
I mean, if the ideal hero lurking in our collective imagination carries a rifle and really believes in decisive action, what does that imply about the kind of challenges we subconsciously expect to face? And maybe more importantly, the kinds of solutions we ultimately seek in what's clearly an increasingly complex world.